Welcome the timeless forgotten mystery. Who were the men who moved in silence, wrapped in secrecy, speaking only in whispers? Their image left behind more questions than answers. What force rises in a land broken after war? And why does its shadow still linger today? In the ruins of the South, when voices cried for freedom and old powers collapsed, a hidden circle began to form. At first, it seemed like play, but beneath the surface it carried fear, and fear soon became a weapon. A strange sound was born, klux, a word without clear meaning, yet soon known by all. What started as laughter around a table turned into a name that carried terror, and history would never forget it. This is not only a story of secrecy but also of the lessons history leaves for us. If you enjoy calm journeys into the past, remember to subscribe. Now let us step back into the ashes of war, where the ground was ready for division to grow. The war had ended, but peace was not gentle. Across the South, cities lay in ruins, homes were burned, and families torn apart. Freed men and women walked uncertain roads, searching for safety and dignity. Former soldiers returned to find their land poor, their pride broken, and their voices heavy with anger. It was a place where silence carried tension, where every glance could spark conflict. In this fragile land, whispers spread faster than comfort. The newly freed longed for schools, rights, and a future, while many of the defeated feared change, fearing the loss of all they once knew. Division was not just political. It was in the air, thick like smoke after battle. Out of this uneasy silence, new movements began to stir. For those who had lived in bondage, freedom was both a blessing and a trial. Many had no land, no wealth, only their determination and hope. Schools were built, churches filled with voices, and leaders rose from the once voiceless. It was a fragile but bright beginning, a dream of equality growing in dark soil. But dreams often meet resistance. Former masters could not accept the change, nor the thought of sharing power. Violence erupted in alleys, on lonely roads, and in quiet villages. Some men spoke of honor lost, others of pride stolen. Resentment spread like weeds, choking the soil freedom tried to heal. The stage was being set for a dangerous shadow to rise. In those years, the South was not only rebuilding homes, it was rebuilding identity. One part dreamed of progress and unity under new laws, while another longed for the old order, a return to silence and control. These visions clashed in streets, in politics, and even within families. Out of this clash, men searched for a banner to give them purpose again. Bitterness turned into secret gatherings. The smoke of war had cleared, but the smoke of hate lingered, waiting for form, waiting for name. And so, in the stillness of Tennessee nights, the first sparks of a brotherhood began to glow. Among ruins and unrest, the Ku Klux Klan was about to be born. Not all anger shouted in the streets. Some men moved quietly, waiting for their chance. Former officers and soldiers gathered again, but not in daylight. They spoke of honor, of restoring order, of protecting what they believed was theirs. Their meetings were secret, their words heavy, and their ideas darker than night. For many, it wasn't about building a better world but about clinging to the past. Fear of change was stronger than hope for peace. Out of barns, cabins, and crossroads, a shadow began to take shape. It was not yet the hood or the fire, but it was the foundation of something that would soon spread. In this fragile balance between freedom and fear, seeds of a brotherhood were being planted. What began as talk soon turned into rituals, symbols, and a name that would echo through generations. The land was ready, the men were restless, and the hour was near. This is where the path turns darker. Let us step into the next chapter and witness how a group of former soldiers gave life to what they called an invisible empire, a secret order that would scar history forever. In the quiet Tennessee town of Pulaski in 1866, 6 ex-soldiers, weary of defeat and restless in a land stripped of pride, gathered inside a small wooden cabin. They were men without direction, uncertain of their future in a South now bound by new laws. At first, their meetings seemed harmless. They joked, gave each other playful titles, and imagined themselves as part of a secret brotherhood. Lanterns flickered, and the sound of laughter mixed with whispers in the night. But amusement soon darkened. They stitched robes, invented rituals, and gave themselves strange powers in secrecy. The outside world was changing too fast for them, and in this game, they found control, a way to shape fear. Behind masks, they felt stronger than as defeated soldiers. In that cabin, what began as play turned into a movement that would outlive them all. They created symbols to shape their circle, drew odd sketches, and invented strange words. Their leader was called a Grand Wizard, while others became dragons, titans, and knights. At first, these names sounded like children's games, but soon they carried weight. Rituals were whispered, oaths repeated, and meetings cloaked in silence. Symbols gained power, and to many, the sight of white cloth under moonlight stirred unease. For those who wore it, it gave a rush of strength. The first rides began as pranks. Disguised in robes, the men rode through the countryside under the moon, pretending to be spirits, ghosts of dead soldiers. They laughed at the frightened faces they left behind. But what began as jest quickly became more. Families who had just begun to taste liberty heard hoofbeats at night with dread. Some whispered prayers, others held their children tight. The fear was powerful, spreading faster than any weapon. Soon, dozens became hundreds, drawn by the promise of secret strength. What started in laughter now echoed in silence, broken only by the sound of horses and lanterns glowing in the mist. The idea spread beyond Pulaski. Soldiers carried it from town to town. Communities copied the rituals, sewing robes, riding by night, whispering the same oaths. The laughter of the 6 men was gone, replaced by ambition. They no longer rode for play but to send messages. Schools, churches, and homes of leaders became targets. Fear traveled faster than freedom, and the shadow of Pulaski stretched wide across the South. By the end of 1867, they called themselves an empire invisible. What began in a cabin had grown into a movement feared, admired, and secretly supported. To its members, masks brought pride and belonging. To its victims, they brought silence and terror. But no empire stays hidden forever. Violence was becoming too open, too brutal to ignore. The invisible was about to step into the light. The late 1860s brought fragile hope by day, but dread by night. Families dreamed of futures, yet when darkness fell, candles were blown low and prayers whispered. Horses in the distance meant riders cloaked in mystery. Their silence was heavier than words. Even when they did nothing, their presence lingered like smoke after battle. Fear itself had become their weapon. Schools, churches, and homes were visited, doors rattled, lanterns glowing. Sometimes they struck, sometimes they didn't, but the silence left behind was just as powerful. Stories traveled fast, turning whispers into storms. The Klan didn't need to appear everywhere. Fear made them present in every home, every dream. Their true weapon was not the torch or the bullet, but dread itself. Communities carried their fear like chains. The less they were seen, the larger they became in imagination. The invisible empire was built not on stone or law, but on whispers. By the early 1870s, their violence could no longer be ignored. Newspapers across the nation carried the stories. Families begged for protection, teachers pleaded for safety, politicians asked whether freedom could survive if terror ruled the night. In 1871, new laws gave the president power to send troops against the Brotherhood of Fear. Courts began trials. For the first time, victims told their stories in courtrooms. The invisible was becoming visible. Soldiers marched into counties once ruled by fear. Some Klan members were jailed, others fled, and villages once silent breathed again. The law had pulled back the curtain, and for the first time, the riders were being hunted instead of feared. But while their strength weakened, their presence did not vanish. Some melted into daily life, others waited in silence for another chance. The empire was wounded, not destroyed. History shows that silence often hides what will return. After the early 1870s, hoofbeats faded. Soldiers pressed hard, courts spoke, and masks disappeared from many towns. To the world, the Brotherhood looked gone. Families breathed again. But silence can deceive. Though invisible, the memory remained. Parents told children of the ghosts who once rode. By firesides, stories lived on, half real, half legend. It was not an ending, but a pause. A seed buried, waiting for the right time to rise again. Different people told the tale in different ways. One story spoke of fear, another of honor. Together, these stories built a divided memory that shaped how generations would see the past. Stories told in homes soon grew into myths in the public mind. Newspapers, travelers, and local gatherings kept the memory alive. With each retelling, the image of the riders became larger than life. Some feared their return, while others longed for it. In this way, the Klan did not need to march to remain present. It lived on in memory, carried through words, silence, and longing for times that could never return. As decades passed, the brotherhood became more than a memory. It turned into legend. Children who had never seen the riders grew up hearing of their power. For them, the Klan was not just history, it was a story shaped by fear and imagination. The line between truth and myth blurred, and in that blur the Klan gained a second life. Myths carried symbols more powerful than fact. Lanterns in the dark became signs of invisible armies. Tales of ghostly riders grew stronger each time they were told. Some shuddered at the name, others whispered it with pride. What had once been a secret brotherhood now lived in imagination, stronger than it had ever been in reality. And within that legend, the ground was being prepared for its rebirth. Over time, even silence became part of the legend. Families avoided speaking the brotherhood's name aloud. Teachers skipped over it in classrooms. Communities pretended the riders had vanished, yet everyone remembered. And in remembering, they gave the shadows life. Fear did not need to march in the streets to remain powerful. It only had to linger in the mind. In this silence, myths grew stronger. People argued over what the riders had truly been. Some called them defenders of tradition, others destroyers of peace. The truth faded beneath layers of stories and silence. Though gone from sight, the Klan lived on in memory sharpened by quiet. By the late 19th century, silence itself became the stage upon which the myth performed. The quiet decades did not erase the idea. They preserved it. Myths carried through whispers, stories, and symbols. When new generations faced uncertainty, they remembered the old tales. When the South searched for identity in a changing nation, it reached for legends of the past. And within these legends, the Klan waited quietly, ready for rebirth. This chapter ends not with hoofbeats, but with echoes, for silence can guard memories as powerfully as words. And so we move into the next part of the story, where a new century would breathe life into an old shadow. A time when film, spectacle, and mass movements turned myth into reality, and the Klan rose again from memory into power. As the 20th century began, the South and the nation were changing. Cities grew larger. Factories filled the air with smoke. Immigrants arrived from distant shores. The memory of the riders remained alive but faint, half real, half legend. Most believed the brotherhood had vanished with the century before. But myths have a way of waiting. Silent seeds grow when the ground is ready. America faced new tensions. Economic shifts unsettled old traditions. Cultures mixed in towns. And films, newspapers, and magazines spread powerful images into every home. In this restless time, the story of the Klan returned, not as a circle of men in a cabin, but as an idea reborn for a modern age. It would rise again with new faces, new power, and a stage larger than anyone had imagined. In 1915, a film was released that changed how Americans saw the past. It was called The Birth of a Nation, directed by David W. Griffith. It told a story of the Civil War and its aftermath, but twisted history into myth. The film showed the Klan not as a brotherhood of fear, but as heroes riding to save a troubled land. Audiences watched in wonder. The images were powerful, larger than words, larger than memory. The film spread across the nation. Crowds filled theaters, applauding masked riders on the screen. For many, this was their first vision of the Klan, not whispered, but shown in spectacle. The myths of the past had been dressed in moving pictures, and millions saw them as truth. Cinema gave the Klan something it had never possessed before, the power of national imagination. The film's impact did not stay inside theaters. It spilled into the streets. Across the South and beyond, new groups gathered, not inspired by memory, but by spectacle. Robes were sewn again. Rituals were reinvented. The Klan's name returned to life. What had seemed buried in history now walked openly once more, carried by cinema. By the early 1920s, the Klan was no longer a secret brotherhood. It had become a mass movement, claiming millions of members not only in the South, but across the Midwest and North. This new Klan marched in parades, built monuments, and spoke with political voices. It was not the old riders of the 1860s. It was larger, louder, and more visible than ever before. By the mid-1920s, the Klan presented itself as part of the nation's culture. Entire families joined. Businesses and churches opened their doors to parades. Newspapers printed stories of their gatherings. Politicians stood among them. They filled city squares and lit the night with torches. For many, this was not the Klan of whispers, but of spectacle and power. Yet beneath the surface, It was still built on division and the myths that had fueled it from the beginning. But mass movements carry weight that can turn against them. By the late 1920s, scandals, infighting, and growing resistance weakened the Klan's grip. Membership declined. Parades grew smaller. Newspapers turned critical. What had risen through film and spectacle shrank under its own weight. Yet the myth endured, waiting to appear again in new forms. The 1930s brought decline. The great parades disappeared. Membership collapsed. Families left quietly. Scandals drove others away. The brotherhood that once seemed unstoppable was losing its hold. The Great Depression shifted attention. Millions struggled for food and work. Survival mattered more than myths. By the end of the 1930s, the empire invisible seemed to dissolve again, not destroyed, but hidden like an old story remembered in whispers. During the Second World War, the Klan was nearly invisible. America's attention turned outward. Soldiers crossed oceans, factories built weapons, families prayed for victory. In such times, old divisions seemed small. Unity mattered more than hate. For many, it appeared the story had ended. But silence is rarely the end. Often, it is only a pause before return. When soldiers came home, America entered a new age of growth and change. But beneath the surface, old tensions remained. The civil rights movement rose, calling for equality in schools, buses, and public life. For the Klan, this was a signal. Silence broke. Shadows stirred. Through the 1950s, their numbers were smaller, their power weaker, but they remained in the background, waiting. By the 1960s, the civil rights movement filled streets with marches and songs of freedom. The Klan answered with violence, bombings, threats, riders in the night. Families lived in fear, but voices of justice grew louder. Television showed the nation the struggle in real time. The world saw the Klan not as protectors of tradition, but as enemies of progress. By the end of the decade, civil rights had achieved great victories, and the Klan shrank once more, a shadow unable to stop the dawn. The story of the Klan is not only about those who wore robes, but about the shadows they cast. It is about the fear they spread, the divisions they deepened, and the courage that rose to meet them. Each rise was built on fear and silence. Each fall came through truth, courage, and progress. History warns us that shadows return when forgotten. Memory is our defense. Stories live when they are shared. The way we tell them shapes the future. Hate grows in silence, but hope grows in memory. This story reminds us that shadows may rise again, but so will the light. And in remembering, we carry hope forward.